Welcome to another bonus edition of Upon Further Review.
Upon further review,
And in this edition, we'll be talking about the New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. And this Week 6 matchup will be on October 12th at 8:30 p.m. on Sunday Night Football on NBC. And the Giants are 3-2, and they're scratching up at the Eagles, who are 4-1 in first place, as they're right there clawing at their feet. And right in this game, they have a chance to not just claw at their feet, but punch them right in the grill and get them to tied. As the Giants have a chance to tie the Eagles with the win, and they'll be right there with them. And the Cowboys, depending on what happens in that game in Seattle. The Cowboys win, they'll be in first place regardless of what happens. Of course, if the Eagles win, they'd be tied with the Cowboys. But if the Giants win this game and the Cowboys lose, we'd have a three-way tie there between the teams that have each won. They've been trading, places, beating the Cowboys in the last week of the season, going back the last few seasons, and the Redskins also, but the Redskins aren't really going anywhere this year. But this game right here has huge implications in that NFC East, in this rivalry game. Last year, both of these teams won on the road. So last year, the Giants beat the Eagles in Philly, and the Eagles beat the Giants in New York, but that was last year. So we'll see what happens this year. But so far this year, the Giants started off the season with 2 losses. First, they lost in Detroit on Monday Night Football as part 1 of the doubleheader they had there in Week 1 on the Monday night. And they got beat up pretty bad by the Lions. And then they ended up hosting the Cardinals. The Cardinals came into town, and even though Carson Palmer, ended up going down and Drew Stanton was the quarterback, they actually lost that game to the Cardinals. But then, 0-2, they bounced back, and they ended up hosting the Houston Texans. They beat the Texans. Then they went to Washington, and they beat the Redskins on Thursday night, as Eli had a huge game. Eli was responsible for 5 touchdowns. He threw 4 touchdowns. He ran for 1. He threw 300 yards. They won that game 45-14. And then last week they hosted the Falcons, and they beat them by 10 points. Not as big of numbers, but they got the W, and they're above 500 now on the season at 3-2. And for the Eagles, they were 3-0, as they started off by beating the Jaguars in Philly. Then they went to Indianapolis, beat the Colts, as they handed the Colts their second loss, as it was the first time Andrew Luck had ever been 0-2 in his career, and they beat them by a field goal on Monday Night Football. And then they hosted the Redskins, and they beat them by a field goal. Their games have been exciting for sure. They were down to Jacksonville in that Week 1 game 17-0. They scored 34 unanswered points to win. Same thing, that Colts game, they come back, they win by a field goal. And each of those first 3 weeks, and those first 3 wins, and they started off 3-0, Nick Foles threw for over 300 yards. He threw for 322 yards in Week 1, 331 yards in Week 2, and 325 yards in Week 3. But then in Week 4, when they went to San Francisco, the Niners got their first win of the regular season in Levi Stadium, their new stadium. They won by 5 points in a tight game where the Niners shut them down. The Niners kept them out of the end zone. They scored all 21 points, either on defense or special teams. They blocked that punt. It was just crazy. That was a crazy game. They lost the game, and the Eagles actually had the number 1 fantasy defense that week in the loss, because all 3 touchdowns were attributed to the defense. Because the special teams counts for defense on fantasy. But anyway, this ain't fantasy. This is real football. And they won. They bounced back after that loss to beat the Rams. That was in Philly. It was a tight game, too. The Rams almost came back on them, but they pulled it out. Foles did not put up the big numbers as he had in those first 3 weeks, and that's what they need out of him, is they need him to put up them numbers, and they also need to get some more production out of Sean McCoy. McCoy's only got 273 yards rushing so far this season, as he's not been following up his championship rushing title campaign of 2013 with a big rushing season so far this year, but we shall see how things develop. Of course, Darren Sproles being in the backfield, he's getting some touches, and he's got 172 yards rushing. He's also got 198 yards receiving, as he's been a boost for that offense. Macklin's been doing pretty good too. He's got 4 touchdowns already. Zach Ertz is also a weapon. They got the weapons, Nick Foles altogether has thrown for 1,380 yards, whereas Eli so far, he's thrown for 1,174 yards. Rashad Jennings, he's not playing in this game, so they're going to have to rely on Andre Williams. Rashad Jennings had been looking pretty good for the most part, but he went down. He ain't going to be playing, so they're going to be without him. And let's look inside the numbers for these two teams. They're going at it on prime time on Sunday night in this exciting NFC East rivalry game. And the Giants are 17th in the NFL when it comes to passing yards per game, and the Eagles are 9th, so they're top 10 in passing yards. They actually have gone down a little bit. They were higher up before, but still in the top 10. And then we look at passing defense. These two teams struggle to stop passing teams from getting yards. The Giants are 25th, and the Eagles are 29th. So they can put up yards, but they ain't really stopping teams. And then, you get the advantage, Eagles advantage when it comes to passing for sure. Number 9 in the passing attack, even though Eli been coming on really strong lately. Like I said, he had 300 yards against Washington, only 200 against the Falcons, but we'll see what he does coming up here. And now let's look at the running attacks, and the Giants are 15th in the NFL in rushing yards, and the Eagles are 23rd. So that right there was, like I was saying, McCoy needs to step it up, and he could. Of course, the Giants are 10th against the run, and the Eagles are 24th. So when it comes to the run, clear advantage goes to the Giants, although no Rashad Jennings. So we'll see, what Williams ends up doing. And so far he has 170 yards off of 54 carries. And in the last 2 weeks, he had 66 yards rushing in week 4, 65 yards rushing in week 5. So we shall see. Of course, Jennings back in week 3 at 176, but before that he was struggling. So it's kind of a question mark. But going to give the edge to the Giants because of their defense against the run. Although the Eagles with McCoy and Sproles, you got to think at some point that McCoy's just going to have a monster game and run for like 200 yards. Maybe that's going to happen on Sunday night. Don't be surprised if McCoy comes out and shines, because in prime time, players, even if they've been struggling, those superstar players like Shady McCoy, they show up in prime time, just like how Eli showed up on that Thursday night game against the Redskins. Don't be shocked to see McCoy show up. And also Sproles, he always shines too, and he can do it, a multiple variety of ways. He can catch the ball at the backfield, and he can return them punts too, so he's going to be a factor in the game. Now we look at the points for both teams, and the Giants are 8th. That's pretty good. Top 10 when it comes to scoring. They can score no problem. They put up 30 points in week 3, 45 points in week 4, and 30 points in week 5. Of course, they only put up 14 points in both of their losses in the first 2 weeks. So, the Eagles hold them to 14 points or less. They got to win. But they put up 30 or more. You put up 30 or more, you're going to win 9 times out of 10. But when it comes to scoring, though, like I said, the Giants are 8, but the Eagles are number 1 in the NFL when it comes to getting into the end zone, and that's because these Eagles score any which way but loose. They have scored every single possible way there is to score except for one way. The only way that the Eagles have not scored yet this season is on a field goal that has been blocked and returned for a touchdown, or if the field goal was kicked and if you caught the field goal in fair territory and it landed, in fair territory, you catch it and run it back. Either blocking it or catching the field goal. Like, say they went for a 70-yard field goal and you caught it in the end zone, you can run it back, or you block it, you pick it up and you run it back. That's the only way they haven't scored, is off a blocked field goal or missed field goal. But they've scored every other way. They blocked punts, they return punts, they return kickoffs. They're freaking just doing it all on the ground, on the air, to every single position player, regardless. It's crazy. They are a non-stop scoring machine. I think they even scored on fake punt, but yeah, so they score at will. And even when even when their offense put up no points, they still scored 21 against the Niners in the loss. So, I mean, they find a way to score, man. They are the most inventive team with that coach, and Chip Kelly, man. That guy, he knows his football in and out. And when it comes to defense, though, that's where these teams, that's where they struggle all around, is their defense. The Giants got a good run defense, but both these teams, the defense, even though the Eagles' defense is opportunistic and they cause turnovers, and that is their lifesaver, their saving grace, because the Eagles have that bend but don't break defense that the Patriots made famous, about 10 years ago. Where the Eagles, they let up lots of yards, but they don't necessarily, they cause turnovers or they somehow find a way to hold a team to just enough points to get the win. But the Giants actually are better when it comes to holding teams from scoring, is they're 17th in the league in against points against, and the Eagles are 25th. So both teams let up points, and we're gonna see. I said both these teams to score. They said the Giants scored 30, 45, 30 in their wins. Well, the Eagles have scored 34, 30, 37, 34. So every time they score over 30 points, they win. And then their sole loss was when they didn't put up any offensive points and they only scored 21, and that was all through defense and special teams. Usually, if you can get 21 points from your special teams and defense, you're going to win because you'll have put up some points. But against the Giants, and the Giants, being that they struggle to stop teams from scoring themselves, I think the Eagles can outscore them. I think you got to give the advantage to the Eagles right there. That somehow, some way they're going to find, scoring opportunities. The Eagles, it seems to me the way Chip Kelly, I don't know, I'm not in their practice, but it seems to me from watching the Eagles that they are coached that every single play is a scoring opportunity regardless. Because it seems that as if the Eagles are always having in the back of their mind, we can score on this play. Every play. That's how they do it. That's how they're always scoring in these awkward situations every which way, is because they were always thinking end zone. Because it's true, the possibility exists. Any single play could turn into a touchdown for either team, regardless if you're on offense or defense. So, that's what makes the Eagles so exciting to watch. And it will be definitely a fun game. We'll see which Eli shows up. Eli usually shines in prime time. It's tough to pick against Eli on a primetime game, whether it be Thursday night, Sunday night, or Monday night. But, I got to do it. I got to go with the Eagles. Like I said, I think Shady going to finally break out and have a huge game. He'd been, waiting for that to happen. And we'll see. Will it happen on primetime? We shall see. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments below. Very interested to hear your opinion and read your thoughts. Share them with all of us and with the world at large by leaving that comment below. And let us know what you think of the show by leaving a comment or hitting the like button or dislike. Either way, whichever you feel. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy it, hit the dislike button. How else would we know how you feel if you don't hit the button or leave a comment? We won't know. But if you don't want us to know, that's your prerogative as well. But if you do enjoy this content, hit the subscribe button as we bring you recaps upon further reviews each and every week for each and every single game in the NFL all year long, including the playoffs. We're also covering the baseball playoffs. We'll be covering the college football playoffs and selected games leading up until then, as we've been doing some of the games in college as time permits. We also do our weekly show, The Wedge, where we do quick picks, fantasy fortunes, fantasy football picks, and the weekly rewind of the week that was, along with the Thursday night upon further review for that week. So keep an eye out for all of that. And once again, thank you very much for listening.